September 11th, this day changed many lives. Something horrible happened this day that shook the world to its core. But what if the real story of 9/11 started long before the planes hit and continues even now in the shadows? What if the ripple effect of this day is more devastating than the attack itself? This is what they never told you: the dark secrets of 9/11. In a prison cell filled with nothing but darkness, a dusty old man is held with chains. He doesn't do much all day. He sometimes sings. The man is Saifullah Paracha. Though he looks in a sorry state now, he was once a businessman and a happy father. He was arrested in a sting operation while he was in Thailand for a business trip because he was suspected of being a terrorist. He never got to meet his family for the last time. He had been suffering brutal torture and severe questioning after that day. He was held without trial for nearly 2 decades. He is one of the many people whose life took a bad turn after 9/11. But why am I talking about this guy? Well, here's the thing. He was never found guilty. Does that mean he is innocent and was punished by flaws in the system, or does it mean something far more disturbing? To understand the full picture, let's go back to the time where it all started, year 1979. The world was divided into 2 parties: the US, UK, Saudi Arabia, and allies on one side, and the Soviets on other. The Soviets were sowing the seeds of communism and seeking more power and control over the world. They started invading Afghanistan. Their invasion of Afghanistan was not just about land. They aimed to dominate the beliefs and values of the Muslim world. Afghanistan was their first target, but not the last, as they could have easily moved on to other Muslim nations. A young man in his 20s was observing the moves of the Soviets. He was no fool. He saw the injustice, and he knew it was his calling to fight for justice. That man today is known as Osama bin Laden. He was born in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia in 1957, to a wealthy family, raised with devotion to faith and duty towards the nation. His father, Mohammed bin Laden, was a very devoted Muslim with a humble and generous nature. Bin Laden stayed in his home country and completed his education in Jeddah. For bin Laden, Islam was more than just a religion. It shaped his political beliefs and influenced every decision he made. When the Soviets invaded, bin Laden couldn't just watch. He wanted to do something for the cause. So bin Laden joined the rebels in 1979 and moved to Pakistan. He supplied arms, money, and fighters to Afghanistan. He even moved to Afghanistan himself and carried arms to fight in the coming years. History might shock you, but at that time, the US and bin Laden were on the same side. The war with the Soviets lasted for 10 years. In 1989, bin Laden and the Allies won the war against the Soviets. Then bin Laden returned to Saudi Arabia as a hero. But bin Laden was not happy at all to see his government being totally dependent on the US. The US capitalists' active interference in Islamic world was a risk to Islam. He was afraid that his Muslim brothers would be influenced by them and forget their heritage. So he revolted against it, and it got pretty intense to the point where he started earning his name as a radical opponent of the government. Later on, he got exiled from his country around the 1990s. He later on moved to Afghanistan, and this was how al-Qaeda was born. Fast forward in time. Year 2001, September 11th. The time is 5:45 a.m. 2 men, Mohammed Atta and Abdulaziz Al-Omari, casually walk through the security at Portland International Jetport in Maine. Nothing seems out of the ordinary, right? Wrong. These guys aren't just catching a flight, they're on a mission to spread utter chaos. They board on flight to Boston in the American Airlines Flight 11. After a couple of hours at 7:59 a.m., Flight 11 takes off, flying towards Los Angeles. There are 76 passengers, 11 crew members, and 5 imposters, hijackers on board. And from here on, things are about to get dirty, so brace yourself. Just 16 minutes later, United Airlines Flight 175 takes off from the same airport, also heading to LA, with a similar story. This plane carries 51 passengers, 9 crew members, and 5 hijackers. So in short, 2 planes, 2 deadly missions. Now, here's where it gets real. At 8:19 a.m., Betty Ann Ong, a flight attendant on Flight 11, realizes things are not adding up. She makes a desperate call to ground control.
We're in trouble. The cockpit is locked, and something's going down.
What could have caused this? The hijackers are on the move. On the other side, at Dulles, Virginia, 8:20 a.m., Flight 77 takes off for Los Angeles. There are 53 passengers, 6 crew members, and 5 hijackers on board. Who would have known this was going to be their last ride? Then, at 8:46 a.m., the dreadful thing happens, without any notice, as if it were just a scene from a movie. Flight 11 crashes into the North Tower of the World Trade Center. Boom. The airplane blows like a bomb, causing a huge explosion. In an instant, the passengers die, and New York City is thrown into chaos. But it doesn't stop here. The following Flight 175 crashes into the South Tower 17 minutes later. At 9:03 a.m., now both towers are burning, and the world is watching in absolute horror. While America is engulfing in the horrors, President George W. Bush is in an elementary school in Florida. It is at 9:05 that the Chief of Staff breaks the news to him. Like an ideal leader, Bush maintains patience and doesn't react immediately. There is a huge pressure for the president when the country is in crisis. How would you have reacted if you were in his place? But wait, there's more. At 9:37 a.m., Flight 77 gets rerouted by hijackers and crashes into the Pentagon, the military heart of America, killing 125 people inside. This is the 3rd attack of the day. What could be worse than this? Meanwhile, on United Flight 93, which gets delayed, takes off at 8:42 a.m. The flight takes off from New Jersey with 33 passengers, 7 crew members, and 4 hijackers. And after a few minutes, the crashes start all over New York. So somehow the passengers get word of what's going down. They decide that they're not going to let their plane be used as another weapon. They fight back selflessly. The pilot, Ziad Jarrah, tries to destabilize their revolt by rolling the plane. Sadly, at 10:02 a.m., Flight 93 crashes into a field in Pennsylvania. These passengers saved countless lives by preventing another attack, possibly on the White House or the Capitol. And then, at 10:28 a.m., the North Tower collapses into rubble, followed by the South Tower. 2 tallest skyscrapers of New York, built with years of work, reduced to rubble in a matter of hours. Though America was hit hard, they never gave up. They continued to grow and strive for what they believed in. But the big question is, why was America attacked? Is this related to an old friend of the US, Osama bin Laden? Let's enter a broader analysis. America provides support for governments in the Middle East and elsewhere in the Muslim world. However, al-Qaeda wants Muslim countries to strictly follow Muslim values and social order. And if they don't follow, al-Qaeda takes it as their job to overthrow them. But America is standing like a shield between them. So, al-Qaeda wants to show the world to not take them lightly and to reduce America's power. So, they come up with a plan to attack America. But the terrorists don't have the capacity to destroy the United States militarily, so they set their sights on symbolic targets instead. The World Trade Center is a symbol of globalization and America's economic power and prosperity. Similarly, Pentagon, the headquarters for the U.S. Department of Defense, serves as a symbol of American military power. And thus the event unfolds. How was the attack carried out? The attack planning started in 1996. The al-Qaeda takes 5 years to come up with a perfect plan to attack the U.S. During the 5 years, al-Qaeda selects trusted people who would and could carry out the mission. They select 19 hijackers, out of which 4 are trained to fly commercial planes. Another 15 are trained as combatants to subdue flight attendants and uncooperative passengers. They exploit the loopholes in the security system of airlines and plan to use the planes filled with inflammable fuels like highly explosive bombs. The aftermath. 9/11 mastermind Khalid Sheikh Mohammed reaches plea deal with US, says Pentagon. The New York Times reported that Mohammed, Walid bin Attash, and Mustafa al-Hawsawi had agreed to plead guilty to conspiracy in exchange for a life sentence instead of a trial leading to death penalty. Khalid Sheikh Mohammed is the head of propaganda for al-Qaeda, and also the crazy mastermind behind the attack on 9/11. He was arrested in Pakistan in 2003 and is still in military prison in Guantanamo Bay, Cuba. Speaking of Guantanamo Bay, as of January 2024, 30 men were still being held at the prison, many of whom have not been charged with crimes, and there has been no trial. US repatriates suspected 20th hijacker of 9/11 from Guantanamo Bay. A news article dated 8th of March 2022 says Khatani was tortured so badly by interrogators. According to Susan Crawford, a top official in then-President George W. Bush's administration, it was abusive and uncalled for, and coercive. This violates human right to life, war on terror. President George W. Bush declared, "Every nation, every region now has a decision to make. Either you are with us or you are with the terrorists." By this ultimatum, the so-called War on Terror was declared. It was a global American-led military campaign launched in response to the September 11, 2001 terrorist attacks. The declaration led to the invasion of Afghanistan, then Iraq, to the rise of ISIS, and the increase of Iranian-backed militias across the Middle East. It caused the deaths of thousands of servicemen and women and many more civilians. This exploded hatred of some Middle Eastern countries for the US, and war between these two powers started. In the war, US used secret detention centers and torture, full-scale invasions, and drone strikes. This war caused profound and lasting harm to communities around the world. Thousands of people died horribly in the attacks on September 11, 2001. But nearly 1 million died from the chain reaction of attack in the Middle East after the war. Similarly, on October 26, 2001, the US passed the Patriot Act to protect the freedom of its citizens. But what happens when freedom comes with a price tag? Its policies made marginalized people's life harder in the US. The act expanded the power of law enforcement's surveillance abilities, including wiretapping, pen register monitoring, and access to electronic communications. It also allowed for sneak and peek searches, where government agents could enter a property without the owner's knowledge and search for evidence. This is a clear violation of the right to privacy. These actions of America look very harsh, but it brought results as well. The flight security has become very strict nowadays. Though it causes problems for passengers, it equally ensures safety of the passengers. With all the power and authority from the War on Terror and the Patriot Act, American intelligence officials located the leader of al-Qaeda, Osama bin Laden, in Pakistan. He was shot and killed on May 2, 2011, 10 years after the 9/11 incident. This is how the attack on 9/11 started and ended with bin Laden. But the real victims of this attack are still suffering in the shadows. Sun Tzu wrote, "All warfare is based on deception." But who's deceiving whom? And who's really paying the price? The real question is not who is in the right or who is in the wrong. Many innocent people lost their lives due to war between some following philosophies and some chasing after revenge. But after all of this years, what happened to Saifullah Parasha? According to reports, he was released after 20 years in prison. He safely reached Pakistan on the 29th of October, 2022. His story is one of the many stories that were buried down after the event. This story reminds us how the having line between justice and revenge to disappear caused someone's life a living hell. Thank you for watching. If you liked this video, please leave a like and comment. Subscribe to get notification of other videos from our channel.